Hello everyone, I'm Shepherd of Fire. Welcome to the BrigRR channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. So we're going to be essentially tactically examining a situation that came up in one of our ops. So basically this operation went terribly awry because of a number of factors, and I'm going to be making this video as a reference for anyone who maybe runs their own community, as well as for the personnel within the BrigRR. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch the video in question. That video being caught off guard, which is up on YouTube. There will be a link in the description for you guys to check out. And we're going to essentially see exactly what went wrong and how it should have been mitigated. So the reason I'm doing this video is first and foremost as the squad leader, as well as the mission maker in that mission. It didn't sit well with me, the actions that we took, and I want this video to become a reference for so that this sort of situation doesn't happen anymore. Or well, that there's a drastic reduction of times in which this situation will occur. So I'll be doing that. I'm not gonna do anything that fancy. I have the game open in a separate tab. I'll be going over the video and kind of the important parts and what should have been done, and maybe hopefully that way we can all learn from in a pretty simple way how to avoid these sorts of situations. First off, I'd like to point out that this is not one of our regular ops. This is one of our weekday ops that are non-mandatory. Therefore, we are extremely low on the actual players. There's only 3 of us in this particular raid. So the raids, what they are is just a small mission, generally special forces type mission, at night, suppressors, stealth, sneaky shit, and it's not meant to be anything big, but that doesn't mean that the odds aren't going to be stacked against us, which is exactly the way here. But what I mean to say with all this is that the ops are a lot less complex. Or rather, the raids are a lot less complex than our standard ops, so I'd like you to bear with me. As far as the planning goes, now in the raids, everyone in the team gets to kind of help with the planning process, and we do this because the raids are kind of a way for not as experienced squad leaders to go in and give their opinions before they kind of fully fledge out into fully formed squad leaders in our standard operations. So what happens is that while in our standard operations it's a specific group of people who decides the operation planning in advance, in the raids, soldiers are briefed on the spot and we all come up with a plan together. So that's kind of what we're running off here. So bear with me. So first things first, before we actually get into the video, let's take a look at the battle plan. So the idea here is a parachute assault by having the soldiers deploy from the west. You can't see the jump point from here because of the map, but we're supposed to have a drop point from the west, land at DZ Osprey, move through, secure this compound where we are currently at in this part of the video, and then move to a base of fire Falcon, which will then allow us to recon the town of Everon, as well as our 2 objectives, compound 1 and 2, and from which we're going to engage and bound assault these 2 compounds once we are done using base of fire Falcon. Now there is a problem here that is essentially hindsight, but I believe could be applied as a measure of precaution. Now, I suggested during the planning session that instead of doing this and went directly to this compound and then directly to Base of Fire Falcon. My suggestion was that we moved north and around to this large hill here at 118. The reason being is that if we went here, we would be able to see not only the town but our base of fire. So using this here as an observation point to then move to a base of fire to then move to an assault. And essentially what that does is that that greatly enhances our recon, our reconnaissance of the area. It really gives us a lot more intel as to what we're about to go into. Now, I'd like to clear out something. In my unit, I do the very large majority of the missions, and there was no difference here. I was the mission maker here, so while I didn't necessarily metagame, it's going to play into it here because there is an enemy squad that is at this location, but I'd like to point out that if you're in a planning session, everything that is of good use to you is also of good use to the enemy. It's foolish not to believe that. Like, I'm removing my knowledge of mission making of the town because if I was a regular soldier, I wouldn't know about it. So I usually do my plans accordingly. So essentially, what's happening here is that we kind of failed to see that any point that is helpful to us will also be helpful to the enemy, and that the enemy will generally counteract those points, and that generally, even if it turns out not to be the case, we should prepare for that to happen. Now, I'm not trying to say that this is not a "I told you so" kind of video. I'm just explaining why I think that this was kind of a rushed option. As far as the actually doing the safe option, which would have been to go all the way around and secure everything. So going back to what I was saying, any point that is helpful to you is helpful to the enemy. This will include bases of fire. It will include all that sort of shit. So you have to think about, when you're going about mission planning, you have to be thinking about, if you were the enemy, where would you put your troops? And that is kind of what I thought. That's if you're a good mission maker, that's exactly what you're going to be thinking of. You're going to be thinking of, if I was the enemy, where would I put my troops, and what kinds of troops would I put where? So what happens is that, and in the town, I have several two-man patrols, and outside of the town, in points of interest, such as small forest patches, and this hill, I have enemy fire teams. Specifically here, there's a mixed RPG machine gun team. So, and that ends up costing us. So, we'll see that later on in the video. We end up running into those hostiles. But before we go there, I'd like to point out that had we taken the precaution of going around and not only recon the objective but also our base of fire, we would have much likely have been safer. We wouldn't have ran into those guys, and that would have helped. Now, this is kind of seen as hindsight, but it's just what I'm saying. It's not really hindsight if you think about it. If you really digest the situation properly, it's more about making sure of where you're going to be. The reason why we got fucked the way we got fucked is because we rushed into Base of Fire Falcon instead of making sure that it was clear first, which is a mistake that I believe some communities will make, and that we have done in the past and that we've done now. And so that's the point of this video. I will explain exactly what's going on here. So that's point number one. There's that flaw in the mission planning, where we should have reconned our base of fire before we headed into it. And obviously we're gonna get hit, and just that tiny detail, just those extra, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes of walking and maybe another 5 of reconning would have saved us and would have likely have won us the day, even against desperate odds, because that's kind of how we work. We had the advantage of night vision, which the majority of the enemy didn't have. And notice how I say the majority, not all of it. That'll play into another mistake, and that then will be hindsight. But yeah, so basically, bottom line, do make sure to check your points of interest. Do make sure to look twice. Think about what the enemy would do if it makes sense for him to be there. And if that is the case, if you're too close to like a major objective and whatnot, it's always helpful to check ahead before rushing in. There was a second plan which is not shown here, which would have been to assault the town from the beach to where we didn't have a base of fire. That would have worked as well. However, essentially what that would have done is that we'd have no recon going in. But at least it gave us a good way into the town, and that way we can probably we'll be in cover. We can consolidate and engage from inside buildings. But regardless, this is what we chose. So this is exactly how that's going to play out.
Contacts right in front of me. Towards into the town from northeast.
Now this is seconds before things go down. So at this point we have taken over what is the top of the hill. We are looking out towards the town itself, trying to look for contacts, and we'll see that just in a moment. We'll encounter contact, or well, Desert Fox, poor Desert Fox is going to encounter contact.
Flashlights on me. Contacts right in front of me. I'm dead.
So what's happening here is that Desert Fox encountered contacts in extreme close range so fast that he couldn't respond himself. So he, obviously he tried to engage to no avail, which we tried to engage then after. So what happened here is that I believe that when he checked the east-northeast side, he didn't check it thoroughly, and he didn't make sure that he didn't make sure that all the way up into the side of the hill there were contacts. Now I'm not dissing Desert Fox in particular. What I'm saying is that this is kind of a common mistake that bases of fire teams generally have, where they'll reach a hilltop and they'll start scanning everything, forgetting that like possibly 100-meter defilade. Now, obviously, I'm not seeing what Desert Fox saw. Maybe the enemies were just in a position that he could not see them. They were just that well concealed. But regardless, the fact that we didn't see them kind of made us suffer this, and obviously because these guys were a lot better armed than we did, they all had PKMs and they all had RPGs and powerful body armor. We ended up kind of being at a disadvantage, and Desert Fox was killed. Now this plays into kind of the next part of the video, which is the fact that I, as soon as the engagement is done, which would be about here. What was happening here is something that obviously I'm looking at. This yes is complete hindsight. I didn't turn off my laser, and neither did Webb. I mean, not only do we need it to kind of, we kind of needed to engage these targets, but we're going about the hill checking the bodies as if we're completely alone, which is kind of an issue given that the enemy does have some elements of night vision, which is why before I said that the majority of enemies didn't have night vision. Some elements did have night vision, and that was mentioned in the briefing. So what's going to happen for the rest of this op is essentially the fact that we got thrown into disarray. Such a sudden shocking encounter. Pretty much shook me up, and that did kind of affect my mission, my capabilities. Now, I'm not afraid to admit that was kind of the reason why the rest of the mission is not gonna go well. So there was that detail in the start, and then there's this. So as we're going about clearing here, we'll see that the we've successfully eliminated kind of our intruders here, and we're checking for any remaining survivors. And it's at this point that I start thinking maybe he didn't check thoroughly enough, or that maybe the enemy were lying down in a way that we didn't see them. And at this point, the first thing we should have done is, well, we should have started thinking, well, that fucking woke them all up, right? Which is precisely what happens. Obviously, you can see there that I used MCC to create a zone, and essentially what that did is that activated Gaia, which sent all the enemies towards us as a response to the gunfire. Now, what's happening here throughout the rest of this video is that right now, at this moment, I forgot to realize exactly, I didn't realize exactly what odds we were up against. Even though I made the mission, I totally forgot, due to the shock, that about exactly what sort of odds we were facing. And truth is, we're facing about nearly a platoon of enemies out there. We're not gonna win this fight by standing here. And I want you to understand that just how precarious our situation is here. We are on a hill with no cover. There's two of us. We don't have any sort of heavy weapons to deal damage, so we don't have any anti-infantry high explosive rounds. We don't have grenade launchers. We don't have machine guns. We don't have marksman rifles. We have no sort of heavy infantry weapon. We are virtually powerless. The hill that we're on has no cover, and there's just two of us. We're horrifically outnumbered. Now, one can count that as one of the reasons why we kind of lost here. I don't believe so. I think that the as far as number disparity goes, there is a way we could have won, and that is very simple. We should have pulled back and just engaged some sort of peeling, and that would kind of transform the mission into a sort of defense in depth kind of situation. Now, I've set up a situation here in Arma, which is roughly identical to what we had. So this is the enemy fire team that we killed, and we are now one man short. So what's happening here is that this is the RPG team that's coming for us, and there is a second team going around us. Now, you'll see what's happening in the video is that I decided that no, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna stand my ground. The reason I took this I took this decision is that I was in shock. So I didn't think to check my odds and check my options. This is something that happens quite commonly to squad leaders, where they'll be too afraid to actually retreat and to kind of leave their post. Obviously, in this situation where we're the only ones, there's no one we're kind of taking the benefits away by retreating, except ourselves. So essentially, what happens here is that I try to stand my ground. Now, had I retreated, it would have looked something like this, right? We'll be moving away. The enemy will move up here. The enemy will keep... Why are you going so slow, buddy? Come on now. Are you hurt or something, bro? Okay. So basically, what's gonna happen is that they're going to converge on that location. We'll have probably more than enough time to kind of make it to these trees here, maybe. And note that at this point, from here, we've essentially swapped places with the enemy. So now we're the ones in cover with the enemy coming to us. This gives us combat advantage. Now, obviously, these two guys are coming over here. So if we look from the perspective of the Iraq soldiers down here, we're going to see that the enemy is going to be coming in from the side of the hill, which has them, completely exposed, while we have relative cover, as well as the enemies up here. Now, obviously, this is kind of a battle of odds. We will have had to have taken them out, relatively fast, and we'll have enemies coming in from both directions. But I believe that this is a much more winnable battle than the one we had before. And obviously, there was other squads down there that were probably making our way to us. So pretty much all that we really needed to do was either hold this location here or just keep moving into better areas, such as this, such as this kind of this tree assortment here, this small tree line. This probably could have held our ground pretty well. We have numerous bushes for cover. We have a bunch of trees for cover. We should be pretty good as far as engaging targets here. And if push comes to shove, even if it gets worse, we'll have a way out. We'll be able to exit throughout here, and eventually we'll just keep going all the way out. So we believe that, at least I believe that in the long run, we would have been able to essentially spend all the enemy's resources, make our way back up to Hill 118, and we would have been able to engage the town or any remaining forces from there. Instead, what happens is that, and let's get back to the video. Instead, what happens is that I begin to engage. Essentially, another thing that happens here is that while I'm up there, it didn't even dawn on me that the enemy had some teams with capable night vision. And even though I'm running a suppressor on my gun, which technically should suppress my flash, they were going to be able to see me. So I didn't turn off my laser. That was yet another detail that contributed to my downfall, because as I'm engaging, boom, no head. This ends up killing me. Essentially what happens past the video is that Webb tries to save me. He fails because he gets enveloped. He's able to take out one team, retreat, and as he's retreating, he gets caught by the second one. So essentially, we just get run down. So basically, what happens here is what's happening in this video is essentially just a combination of things. The first and major problem would have been the planning. It was relatively careless as far as the battle plans went. Battle plans were very chillaxed, very Rambo. Let's go in there and fucking do it. No need to be taking the scenic way around. Let's just go in there and raid this shit like we're some fucking Spec Op, fucking Navy SEAL, Navy Ranger shit. and fucking let's just go in there. I'm fucking Rambo. I have my fucking rifle with me. I'm sneaky. I'm fucking Tom Cruise and all this dumb shit. And that didn't happen. Because we got up there and we got caught with our pants down. So as far as the planning went, it was careless, and it was too Rambo, and it got one of our guys killed. And what happened when that one guy that was killed? What happened there is that it began a kind of a demoralization of the troops. Seen as before there was 3, now there is 2, and we're fighting a potentially platoon-sized enemy force. Again, I don't give a fuck about number odds. Obviously they matter, but I believe that through skill and tactics we would have been able to beat them. And And basically, what happens here is that due to the shock of how fast those events went by, me at like my personal squad leading skills were affected. And they were affected in the ways that I started forgetting about the little details, and I decided to try and hold my ground instead of just taking a loss, and trying to retreat and then regroup, which is something that I don't really see many squad leaders doing, especially in the BrigRR. Something goes wrong, we're very used to just not moving and not necessarily adapting to the situation, which is something that hopefully I'll see changed with this video. So that was number 2, was a general lack of morale and the breakdown just a slight debuff, I guess, to the order in the mission, which then led to not so good decisions, which is what I believe is the final straw in how wrong this mission went, is that, due to my lack of decision-making skills because of how affected I was, we lost our power, one of our only powers that we generally have over Arma AI, which is, our capability of using our heads to, get better tactics, outplay them as far as tactics goes. So that's pretty much it. I hope you've learned. I hope this has shed some light on some events. Maybe if you're from another unit, maybe you've seen this happen. And I hope you've learned not to do this sort of thing in the future. Take my mistakes as reference. Learn from them, and hopefully you'll do better in the future. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'm Shepherd of Fire. Stay tuned to the BrigRR channel for more ops, as well as a few more of these instructional videos as there is opportunity to make them. And I will I'll see you next time.